contribute to the broader learning, as I said, we'll be having the South-South learning. So that's going to be very important. So the cross-learning I've already mentioned among communities in Kenya. So what we learn about land access across different geographies and different cultures, are there things that are similar? Are there things that are different? And how can we use that to influence? And then after we have shared the findings, we will now introduce us to the comparative learning through what we are calling learning alliances. As I have mentioned, learning is going to be a very key part of this project. Once we generate lessons here and lessons in Latin America, learning is key, but how are we going to engage more people in the learning process so that the learning goes beyond the people in this room, the people who have been doing research, and a few that will perhaps get to our website, see the working paper or policy briefs. How else can we engage people so that we have better learning? So we are going to discuss that. We have a session to us that with your participation, we'll be able to meet our workshop objectives. And with that, I thank you very much for listening. So this is what the project is all about, the broad issues that we are going to discuss. But we'll give you the details of the research we have conducted here in another presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Dr. Lydia Kirumi, for that very good presentation. Please let's give her another round of applause, a good one. Thank you very much. So let's move on with the program. I will start now taking you through the unidentified communal lands. So here, just to remind you, we have three groups here. So we have the Kina community, we have the Ngaremara community, and we have Oldomiro community. So we kind of do a summary because discussing community case by case is quite long. But in our paper, we actually give case-by-case analysis for different communities. So initially, all these communities were nomads, but they have adopted sedentary lifestyles at present. Just to explain this, that initially they would move with the animals and settle. So, Wafugadi on water, then you find them at some different points. They later abandoned it because of human-wildlife conflict, when most of their crops used to be destroyed by animals. They went back to do that. They have a small irrigation scheme of around 200 authorities on behalf of the community. And some of the challenges we had come as a result of interpretation of holding in trust. So we know that the local authorities are able to eliminate land for private individuals, especially in almost all the market centers that you go. You find that land has been given, people have taken deeds. They have been given land, their own land management arrangements. We were, for example, in both Kina and Ngaremara, we found that they had established clusters of villages. In Ngaremara, they call them villages. They have grazing rules in terms of they kind of setting aside pasture for wanaweka nyasi ya wakati wa kiangazi, wakati wa mvua, na hiyo wakati mwingine ni tambarare. So ideally they know that at different seasons they have. Niro had no formal grazing systems, but we found that in 2007 they were able to again formalize grazing systems in all the Niro. And the most important thing to note here is that communities were not averse to sharing pasture. So if your neighbors, kama mandugu zenyu hawana nyasi, there were systems in which they would come and negotiate with this particular community, and they are accessed the pasture, and the community is able to share pasture. So I think in almost all these communities, we found that they had those traditional or customary ways where communities could send the elders, say the number of animals they raise. Traditionally, the way the elders were explained to us, cattle rustling is something that was cultural. And even as late as last year, when the cabinet secretary, Kaiseri, was in Isiolo, addressing again issues of loss. The reason being, they did not have a title. And yet, We know that customary other communities in Samburu that were along the highway, the ones that had formed group ranches, were able to be compensated because they had title. The Lapsset corridor has also raised fears that people could be evicted. This is not just in Isiolo, but also in the neighboring periphery. That people know that once, for example, the resort city comes in place, there will be other investments that will be taking place. And if people that happen with the county governments, most of the county governments in the expos that they are holding, some of the things they're doing to attract investors is telling them that we'll give you land. But then whose land is this? Ishamba ni nani ambayo county government? Is it government land? Is it community land? So there should be a distinction between what we mean by trust land and whether we are actually holding that land in trust or we are using that land as government land. Again, the inability to utilize resources is in Oldonyiro, that part of the land that they are settled in is actually government land. It belongs to the livestock marketing division, this group right. Then the part that is government land will go back to the government. So what happens to the community that are settled there? But currently, these communities have to protect that land so that it is not encroached by people from outside. So what we learn from the communities in an adjudicated land is that there is notion that communities cannot manage land, have grazing rules, and they are able to do this even without the intervention of the government. But then some of the practices, kama hiyo kuweka ng'ombe wengi, wanasema Masai anataka akisimama anaangalia you benefit by cooperative. Kwa mfano, kama wafugaji wanaweza weka ng'ombe kiasi kwa ile shamba, nyasi itatosha, si ndio? But mainly driven by land tenure security. And we know that the local government, from experience, and even as well documented in the normal, hii ni shamba ya community ambayo inapeana. Lakini wananchi wenyewe hawaulizwi kwa mfano kama wangetaka hiyo soko pale ama wangetaka hiyo market center mahali ipo. Membership also varies. So initially you can see they started small. This one that started with 47 members, they are now 285. The one that started with 940 members, they are now 3,407 members. Motivation, environment. The community wanted to protect the ancestral land. Again, following the trends that were happening in the Masai lands in the south. These communities had livestock, had access to livestock markets. Initially it was limited. We know that communities that they had to it's something that you had to plan, and then they would come together. We find that in most cases they would access collectively because it would endelea kutumia the customary rules zile wamekuwa wametumia kutoka zamani. Now, one of the things that you notice is that when the group ranches formed, because of the customs that were, then that is what you follow. So we find that the formal rules of managing group ranches, especially by the first generation pastoralists, were never followed. They never did elections, but we know that in recent times, especially from 2000 to date, we've had now the second, what we are calling the second generation pastoralists. These are children of the initial members. We find that when now we have the second generation pastoralists being included in the committees, things are now opening up. They are now holding more elections. Okay, my name is Tim Jagi. I'm a researcher at Tegemeo Institute. We've been working on some work on land tenure issues for pastoralist societies. So as you all know, a large proportion of community land or land under collective access is found in areas that are characterized by low rainfall and high temperatures. As such, you'll find that the best economic activity that can take place there is livestock production. It therefore follows that majority of these lands are occupied by pastoral communities who have actually been using extensive livestock production systems to bring up livestock in these areas. These communities have used collective customary laws in managing this land. However, from the colonial period, the government has been promoting or encouraging communities to privatize land, mainly as in the hope that privatization of land will encourage investments in this land. It will commercialize these pastoralists to commercial livestock farmers, but these objectives by the government has not been met.
mainly is because communities have a different view of the one of the things is that the nomadic pastoralism that they have practiced has been a way of mitigating some of the challenges that they face, including drought and disease. So as such, we've found an area where, even though there have been different projects that have been initiated by the government to kind of commercialize pastoralists, it has not happened. So we are currently in a state where communities have continued to use land under customary laws, even when they have been formalized. For example, where communities have been encouraged to form group ranches, they have not used the group representative act to manage the land. They have continued to use the customary laws to manage the land. So recent research shows that maintaining community land and those access benefits community, especially given the environments such as the environments where our pastoral communities in Kenya are found. And we kind of did our research to try to collect evidence that can inform the debate, especially now that the country is debating the community land bill. And what we are finding is that community mechanisms can actually work if they are supported. And one of the ways to support community mechanisms is to ensure that they are able to enforce the land rights. And that is the customary laws rights that they have been using. One of the ways to do this is to ensure that the current law recognizes these customary lands and actually make sure that if somebody violates it, even if it's taken to a court of law, the court of law actually can recognize the customary lands that the community have been using and can use it to punish people who deviate from this. Another thing that the government can do, or in this case the county governments can do, is that there is need to bridge a gap, because most pastoralist communities lag behind in terms of social indicators. If you look at education, access to markets, they're actually disadvantaged. And we know this has not happened in recent times. It's something that has happened for a very long period. So the county governments have an opportunity to use the equalization fund to ensure that they provide these public goods. And most of these pastoralists are national, and they will respond by improving the value chains. It will create opportunities for incomes, which we believe pastoralists will be able to take up.
Yeah, in the proposed bill, what are some of the gaps that you guys have identified that needs to be addressed before this?
So, for example, one of the key gaps that is in the current community land bill is that the issue of trusteeship is still the way, more or less the way it was in the Group Representative Act and in the Trust Land Act. So where local governments held land in trust for the communities. And then this made it very easy for the government, whether local government or national government, to take away land from the community government, from the community. The communities were never consulted on projects that were being implemented in their land, but then the local government had that trusteeship that they could make decisions on the behalf of the community. So that one is still being maintained in the current bill, rather than addressing how communities can plan for this land, how we can make sure that county governments are able to adapt community plans in their planning systems. As we are talking about developing spatial plans for different counties and also for the national government, also ensure that where we have community lands also involved in developing their own spatial plans, which can actually be adapted and implemented by the communities. So those are some of the things that are missing, because you find that there's a big, as it is right now, still the county government will appropriate that land, even though it belongs to the community, without consulting the community.
So maybe what you're taking the government, because I know the bill has already done the first reading, and I think the second.
The second reading. So yeah, the bill actually has gone in the second reading. Unfortunately, most people are yet to see that the bill that is currently being debated. But after in the first reading, before the first reading, the members of parliament went around collecting the views. One of the things that we currently need is for the House to kind of share whatever they are debating, for people to see whether their concerns were actually implemented in that bill. As it is, people are just speculating what is in that bill. We've had quite a number of versions of that bill. At some point, I think many people have lost track. I think the last one that was quite contentious was when it was included in the omnibus bill. So I think what the House needs to do is also be a bit transparent in terms of sharing this bill, letting other people, see whether the concerns that were raised initially have been addressed. So as we move forward, again, where people have collected evidence, it's good to share this with the team that is debating this, for them to see and actually use this evidence to inform the decisions that they make at the House.
Any other gap?
The other gap, so I've mentioned the issue of trusteeship. There's also one of the things that we don't know how it has been captured in the bill is that if you look at the history of, for example, group branches, there is very well documentation of the challenges and the eventual collapse, and why, for example, in the old Maasai areas, where initially there was a huge number of registration of group branches, we find that majority of them have now collapsed. The reasons why these group branches collapse have not been addressed in the bill, and currently I think we are facing new challenges. So we are facing increased population, we are facing increase in urbanization. So there is need to kind of take a step and look back at what went wrong during the years in the 70s and the 80s, and kind of look at them in the new context. We are looking at where we have increased population, we have people who are not necessarily interested in pastoralism, but they are living in pastoralist land. How can they coexist? The most important issues that have not, it's kind of were there, but they're still there and have not been addressed, are issues to do with environmental management and human-wildlife conflict. As you know, that most of the pastoral areas, they coexist in places that are near to national parks, forests, or game reserves. So there is need not to just address them by law, but also learn lessons. What went wrong in the 70s and in the 80s, where we had less people. So if we are not addressing these things, if we are going to implement laws that are more or less similar to what we had then, in the current context, we expect that we have increased population, we have huge demand of land, and Kenyans right now have a huge appetite for private land. Then I think more things can only go wrong if you don't address these issues.
Thank you.
Sure.